Welcome, everybody, to our forecast and discussion of current energies for March 21. My name is Jona Bryndis, and I welcome all of you here in the Sacred Self-Healing Experience for this interactive discussion. Love that you guys love this format. It's one thing to just do a forecast and tell people what's coming, or to discuss this and go a little deeper into the nuances of what it actually is that we are currently experiencing so that we can better understand what is sort of moving towards us. Yeah, so let me jump right into the current situation and review from February. How are you guys doing today? Is sort of still full moon in February, and a lot of these themes, moving into the pragmatic letting go of what no longer serves us. All this is still going on. And as of right now, while things felt a little that they came to a standstill in February and became a little grindy, if you will, a very subdued feeling that most energetically sensitives had. There was a very strong healing and recovery impulse right now, like as of this minute. I'd love to hear from you guys how this is all translating for you. What were some of the recent developments and observations in your life, and how do you contextualize them? Who would like to share? What are some of the things that have transpired for you? Maybe new insights. February was extraordinary in its capacity to bring in new insights. I'd like to share some of this, perhaps new clarity. Anybody here who had something like an epiphany or a really kind of, you know, seeing something from a different perspective than before, and all of the sudden, your life or your decisions, or whatever it is that you're looking at, even the world perhaps looks differently now than it did, like say a month ago when we did the forecast discussion for February. Anyone who's gained a new perspective, a new viewpoint.
Jona, I'll try and break the ice.
Thank you, Heather, because I was just going to say, so nobody had any insights. Obviously, that is not fair either. I know it isn't like that, but thank you for breaking the ice, Heather. Yeah.
It's just a challenge to try and string together words to explain. And sitting in the thoughts, thinking about it, I think is what we're all doing, trying to figure out what to say and how to say it, and make it relatable to what your question is. So I'll do the best that I can, just because it just happened this morning, my epiphany.
Okay.
And understanding that I've been so focused on my career development and thinking that that was the reason why I've been struggling and having so many problems and blah, 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 because there was a huge trigger for me to even go on this spiritual journey to a deeper level and understanding how I operate. But ultimately, I understand that I still have hooks and I still have triggers that have affected my perspective. And when we start speaking about one of the biggest things that I've been working on, which is claiming my stake, holding my stance, and using my voice to say, this isn't right, I'm not okay with it, and not having to go into the why publicly, but for myself going into the why on a personal level so that I can understand how to make adjustments and corrections, self-corrections. I was looking through some photos this morning of my past 5 years, and when I was going through them, I was noticing all these emotions that I still have attached to these memories, and the emotions kind of, control me still to this day, just because they cut like a knife. And seeing in all these photographs my son was really cool, because for all the sad memories that I have, my son is smiling in every single one of those photos. he doesn't have the same attachments to those memories that I do. It's completely different for him. So that helps me to understand that I've done a good job with my son. I've allowed myself to have a lot of guilt and shame built up around why I didn't claim my stance in the past and how it's really hurt the present moment in time, which is now in the past, but still in the present. Anyhow, just to try and string that all together is the epiphany that I had. It's like, wow, I still have guilt and shame connected to all these things that have happened to me in the last 5 years that I just understand is the reason why I have this perspective that I do to this day. Completely ignoring that and focusing on my future has been one of my distractions, using my whole career development as a distraction from the pain I still have attached to these memories. So it's an interesting epiphany for me. So it gives me a touchstone for me to be able to work on from here on forward.
Heather, this is a wonderful insight, okay, that you realize how much of the past is still haunting you. Yeah, in simpler words, like you said, you described it as hooks and things that influence the way you see things based on the past. I wouldn't go to the conclusion that everything you did in the past 5 years, focusing on your career and so forth, is a wrong thing or is a distraction altogether, because these things do relate to another. Okay, so in your case, a lot of the, say, pain in the past, the struggle in the past, was related to fundamental choices in your career. Yeah, your career was a major stressor, physiologically as well as financially as well as mentally, because it brought in a lot of uncertainty. So I wouldn't go as far as, like letting the pendulum go into the extreme opposite and say, oh, this was all a waste of time or distraction. Do you know what I mean? Because these things do work hand in hand. Yeah, if there are stressors in our life that are immediate, like you have had immediate, say, problems to resolve in regards to your own body. Yeah, the strain on your body in your previous job, and the degradation that you experienced there and so forth. Those were very immediate things that needed to be addressed. Can you hear what I'm trying to say? It's the shift in perspective, the epiphany is wonderful, but the conclusion, could be in the middle more. It was good that you did, but now you got to see other things as well. Yeah, so more like this. It's just the beauty of understanding how our awareness works. Our attention gets directed to the things at hand that need to be seen and need to be dealt with at the time. What I am hearing is that while you focused your energy mostly around changing, your career and the source of income, because you've identified this as the main stressor in your life, you're now recognizing that there are some other deeper stuff, that are trauma related in your case, past related, that are still kind of running the show to a certain degree, and they can pull you back into that. All right. And that this now needs more attention.
Absolutely. And I'm standing here listening to you help me unpack this and put words to it, and I'm smiling. I'm like, yay! I that's growth and expansion right there.
Mm-hmm.
And how exciting that I get to be able to unpack that more. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's a big thing for me to face. It's like facing the dragon. But I'm here. I made it. I can do this.
Yeah. I know. And moving forward, it doesn't mean that it was a mistake that you focus on this. You just now, it's now coming to your awareness that there are other aspects to that. Yeah. And usually the way this works, Heather, for all of us in our life is that when some major relief comes in when we tackled one aspect. We begin to see the other layers related to that. Okay, so we see it right in that moment. It comes to our awareness right then when we need to redirect our focus. So my main plea to you here is do not judge what you've done in the last 5 years, because that is growth. You were growth oriented. That's your alignment was to change that which makes you sick, and you did. Okay, and you're continually doing that, but you're now seeing in order to grow even more, there's another component to that, not just the outer, like changing jobs and stuff like that, but also the inner, the internalization of all of this. Yeah, how to integrate this now and how to recognize why, or not even why, but how the choices that you've made in the past had to be the way they were because they were based on something that needed to be addressed first. Yeah, so all I'm saying is don't judge. Don't judge yourself. Instead, see the beauty in it unfolding right in front of you. Stay in the present moment. See it for what it is. Recognize that, okay, now you see how some aspects of, say like your work or your money situation or whatever, is not just related to the job, but to deeper emotional processing stuff, perhaps even karmic stuff. Yeah, and that they now need your attention. You couldn't have paid attention to this before because the need that had to be covered first was more fundamental. Do you understand how I mean this? There's a hierarchy of needs in us, and if we understand where the foundational need is, then the next layers, they will display themselves in the order we need to address them. The biggest issue with the people in spiritual circles and doing the spiritual journey is that they try to resolve issues the wrong way around. Yeah, they're trying to go into spiritual solutions without having the 3D foundation. And in that, just listening to you sharing here and your continued unfolding awareness, you literally worked through February energies in the way that they try to help us. Yeah, so even if I say, oh, this is going to be a tricky month, blah, 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 the overall process is growth. There's a syntropic sort of nature to the way creation works. It means that it always steers towards evolution. And if we go with it, okay, we experience the least resistance. If we try to go against it, and sometimes we have good reasons, sometimes there's trauma, sometimes there's just sort of the curveball balls that life throws at us that require us to deal with something else first, to prioritize something else first. But the bottom line is, no matter how spiritual we are, there are some fundamental issues that cannot be addressed through, meditating or energy sessions or whatever. Yeah, so the meditations, the mindfulness helps to gain more clarity, but the actual action, the actual doing part, where we integrate that needs to come out of a very fundamental sort of sense of, you called it stance, sense of knowing who you are and where you're at. And that was the task of February, to give us that awareness and to promote decisions that help to create a better foundation. So if you look at the beginning of February to now the end of February, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but the way this looks like to me, you have a much better foundation now than you did a month ago. Some of it was your doing and some of it was just sort of happenstance. But overall, things have cleared up for you, and that's why you begin to see the next layer of that. And that's the deeper, the emotional healing aspect. So right now is a very strong healing and recovery impulse, which is a bit more emotional, but still practical. It still requires us to be sort of have this common sense about things. Internalizing, yeah, which is what the task or the basically the evolutionary sort of movement here is for March, helps us to become more one with all this. So what you still experiencing maybe is I focus a little too much on this sort of as an imbalance, and now I realize I have to focus a little more on that. That is March energy, yeah, where you see when things are out of balance, where things need to be corrected, self-corrected, yeah, where things need to be recovered, reclaimed, and so forth, yeah. So that is very spot on in that way, Heather. Yeah, so when you look at the bigger picture, what these energies actually bring in for you. So looking back and judging what we've done yesterday is always something that I want to say, you know, as much as I motivate people to do inventory, I do not promote to look back and judge what we've done yesterday, because yesterday we were a different person. Yesterday you hadn't looked at those pictures. Yesterday you didn't have this insight yet. Yesterday you hadn't felt that yet. Okay. So today the world looks a little different and you feel differently in it. And therefore any kind of decision that you make, any choice that you make based on today has to be different from what it was yesterday. It's, you know, logical to a certain degree. That's why it makes no sense to go back and judge ourselves for, I mean, the most common one is probably like, why didn't I see this earlier? Or why didn't I do anything about this? Do you know what I mean, Heather? Hindsight is a bit of a, it's an ego thing. Yeah, hindsight. Hindsight is not based on truth, because you cannot compare the situation right now, the present moment, with a past moment. And that's why we cannot really judge ourselves for things. The only time where that occurs as a actual pain in us is when we delude ourselves, when we deceive ourselves, when we lie to ourselves. When we see things, when we have the awareness, but we choose to check out, we choose to hide from it, we choose to procrastinate, we choose not to face it, and that can be painful. Now this is a kind of like a, well, if you will, sort of a negative side effect of awareness, is that not acting, not internalizing, not integrating your growing awareness is becoming more painful, because it's not possible to align yourself to truth and your true self, and at the same time continue to approach things in the way you have approached things and processed things in the past. We have to recognize that aligning ourselves into truth and wanting to live a life in truth means that we are living a life within a different paradigm. This is a different paradigm. And so you cannot compare your awareness level today with your awareness level yesterday. Because once you arrive in truth, you begin to see the delusion in these ego states. And then the hardest part is to not judge yourself when you flip-flop. Not you personally, Denise, Heather. This is something that we all have to deal with as people who've aligned ourselves to truth and growth. We have to recognize that ego is a state of delusion. It's a state of untruth. And the moment you arrive in truth, yes, you inevitably recognize the untruth. It's the first step in arriving in truth is always the confrontation with untruth. You've heard me say this many times here over the past months, because this is the collective process that we're all in. Thank you for sharing, Heather. This is a subject that many people are contemplating about right now. How to contextualize choices of the past. And my tip is, do not compare, because it's a new paradigm. When you arrive in truth, you just have to accept that you were an untruth before, that's all. Does this help to reconcile this a little bit, Heather?
Yeah, it helps me to reframe in a way that's healthy for me so that I don't have to
Yeah.
be triggered by the whole response of, oh, I didn't do it right the first time and here I am going through it again. It's just a really awesome way to be able to put a wrench in that loop.
Yes, and to just accept that it's an unfolding process. Okay, so hindsight doesn't help you with that. Yeah, because how far back do you want to go? All the way to like when you were 12. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. It's all in the now. Right now, how congruent are you right now? How authentic are you right now? Are the choices that you are making right now, are they based on your current awareness level? And once you get this sort of clarity in you and do this consequentially, you immediately recognize that you couldn't have chosen differently in the past. It had to be that way. And then in a more spiritual sense, it comes to you that everything is perfect the way it is. Yeah, it is. Even though you disagree, or we all do, that's our ego, disagree with the circumstances, but they have to be that way so that we can come to the next insight, to the next conclusion, however long it's needed for us to get to this awareness. So these moments of awareness, these moments of epiphany, as you called it here in the beginning, Heather, these are things to look forward to be excited about, to embrace. Yeah, all the way to, I can't wait to see how I see the world tomorrow. Yeah, because you don't know that yet. Whatever happens between now and tomorrow is going to reframe everything for you. And it's exciting because you know what it actually expresses? It expresses that you are able and free enough and in truth enough and love truth enough to freely think, to actually have insights of your own. To have insights is the power of consciousness. It's the greatest power we have as humans. It is what makes us human. To have an ego and to make really bad choices is also part of being human. It's part of our duality, guys. We have both. And our job, and this is kind of like what I announced as sort of the task for 2021 altogether, is to learn how to out-vibrate, how to overcome that duality. What I see, Heather, is that you've internalized the power of your own consciousness this morning. And when you look back, you can see the power of your ego. Okay, and obviously that doesn't go together because you can see now how some of the choices in the past may have not been to your full potential, may have not been your highest expression yet. But at the same time, you also see that it couldn't have been that bad. My son came out pretty well in this, so you see the duality, and overcoming it, or out-vibrating duality, is recognizing that there's kind of like divine timing to everything. It has to be that way, but not as an excuse to not look at things or deal with things, but as in everything just keeps developing the way it needs to develop. My job is to keep moving. And what allows us to keep moving and to keep evolving is the power of our consciousness, the power of insight, not the power of ego. The power of ego pulls us back into our past. So that would be the more spiritual contextualization of what you shared. And it's extremely characteristic of this time right now, Heather. So I want to thank you for your contribution, because this is a lot what people go through right now in their ways. Yeah, Denise is sharing in the chat the feeling and being reminded of the greater presence rather than focus or worry about the future. So this has to do with this divine order, right? That's what I hear you say here, Denise. Also, the reminder of the need to release my own negativity and trusting that this is what brings me healing. Yeah, but I need to apply it and see things differently. Yes, we need to allow that. It has to do with allowing ourselves to form a new viewpoint, even if our ego pulls us into, yeah, but yesterday you saw it that way. We have to learn how to internally process that and say, well, but yesterday was yesterday. This is always what I say to myself. I also deal with the 7-year-old who said, yeah, but yesterday you said we were going to go there at 5 p.m. Now it's 6 p.m. or something. And I said, well, that was yesterday. Okay, today are different things that I couldn't anticipate yesterday. So do you guys get what I'm referring to? Yes, Denise, trusting that life on the outside will eventually adjust to your inside. But the pragmatism commands that we operate on both levels at the same time, that we straddle both worlds. Because sometimes outer shifts and changes can also affect the inside. When it comes to needs, fundamental needs, which are very 3D, shelter, food, clothes, protection, and so forth, this needs to be provided for on a 3D level. So that's the difference between shifting and just sort of allowing things to run your life. Okay, you have to recognize when it's needed to do a change or a shift in 3D so that your inside can change. This is the reason why I keep telling you guys that you don't need to have the full picture figured out. You don't need to have all answers. You just need to know what the first step is. Because once you do the first step, your insight begins to change, your perspective changes, your energy changes, and then you'll see more things. You'll have a higher level of awareness, and you'll also probably have more energy because you've already experienced yourself and being capable of doing one step. Yeah, and it's much easier to recognize or to imagine yourself doing the second step after you've done the first step. You guys know what I mean? This is how you trampoline your way into a higher vibratory state, into your own higher expression, which has this sort of first 3D, and then everything else will follow. So it is an inside out and outside in process. We just have to recognize the timing when we come into play, when we have to act. March calls for action. That's why I picked this act now picture for the write-up for the forecast, because it comes in with the need to move into action, the need to move into integration. And this is a little different for each and every one of us, because some of us have focused more on the 3D in the last couple of months, and some of us have focused more on the awareness and the consciousness part. So depending on what it was that you have focused here in the most recent past, it's probably something that you'll feel as the need now to shift and deal with the other side of it, to bring things into balance. Again, here I recommend the visualization of a pendulum. Yeah, where you understand that the most stable condition is when the pendulum is right in the middle. Yeah, not when it's in either of the extremes. Yes, Cindy is sending her regards to you, Heather, for sharing this. This is a big part of March energies. Any other impulses that you guys have noticed here in February or that have come to your attention just recently? What are some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing right now as energetically sensitives, as aware people, without labeling it? But what are some of the things that you physically or emotionally that you perceive as a challenge right now? Annette is sharing here in the chat, drama at work. What do you think that drama is pointing? What is it teaching you? Do you have a feeling, if you internalize this drama, if you go into it and feel into it, what is that drama at work reflecting back to you? Annette? You know, the things such as maybe I should change my job or stuff like that. Okay, so what you can identify what it triggers in you, fear. Let's go a little deeper here if you don't mind. You can stay on chat, that's fine. What do you think is underneath that fear?
Hi.
Hey, Annette.
Well, I think it's most of it has something to do with the corona situation. And yeah, it feels like it has something to do with that.
Well, you mean, okay, so so fear, you noticing fear as the energy that is coming through your job, or is it triggering fear in you? Is it the fear energy that you get from your job, or is it something that is coming from within yourself? Is it inside or outside?
No, it's mostly outside, I think.
Okay.
I have not so much fear about the corona situation, but it feels like outside there is a lot of fear.
Okay. So this is really, really important as an energetically sensitive to first ask this question. You know, I feel this fear energy. Is this even mine? You know, where is this coming from? How can I contextualize it? So that's understandable. That's something that, you know, many of us here have been dealing with for pretty much the last year, right? And it can get exhausting, right? I mean, because people get depleted, and you know, if there are you know, office situations where people aren't really working together that well anyway, then it can also lead to drama, like you said, you know, drama. So that drama, does that actually have anything to do with you? I mean, you know, does it, is this something where you like go home and, you know, it obviously, you know, when things happen at work, they kind of do relate to us, but is this really where you are standing? You as a person, internally seen. Is this other people's drama or is this your drama?
I think it's mostly, yeah, sometimes I can be, it can be difficult not to be with it, but mostly I think it's the other people's drama.
So when we are confronted with other people's dramas, and obviously there's always a little bit of a challenge if we have codependent tendencies, because if we have codependent tendencies, we have a higher tendency to take this on as our own, yeah, or trying to fix problems for others, you know, and not recognizing how they're actually pulling us in, how they're pulling us into their drama, yeah. So that's just a nuance here, but when we recognize that, you know, there's stuff that is happening around us that depletes our energy, we have to look at, okay, what about that is so depleting? Yeah, what does this trigger in me? What is my reaction? And is that reaction, you know, is that coming from, like, say, past pain or fear? Yeah, is it triggering fear in me now? Okay. Or are there ways to respond to it? So it's basically responding versus reacting. To respond to that, where I don't identify with it, I don't take that on. You know, I can look at it and say, yeah, people at my work are pretty stressed out. There's a lot of fear energy in the office, and it leads to a lot of drama amongst the people. You know, but you see that that's outside of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's right. Yeah.
So March is all about that, Annette, because as empaths, as energetically sensitives or codependents, you know, either one of those nuances here, a spiritually aware person, the boundaries of that often are fluid. Yeah. And some of that has to do with what Heather said earlier, namely that that our emotional processing is in a way that we, instead of actually being fully in the now and feeling exactly what we're feeling right now, our reactivity immediately leads to a flashback that recreates or reminds us of a feeling from back then.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that is no longer how we actually feel about things today. So just here also as the overall theme for March is to really internalize what it is that you're feeling right now, what you need, what you want. Yeah. But Heather called this the stance, to know where you're at. Yeah. And sometimes it's harder to tell apart than at other times. But if we do not cultivate that as a sort of executing our power of consciousness, yeah, on an everyday level, to ask myself, wait a minute, what in me is reacting here? Yeah, is it my past self, basically, you know, like, you know, based on like childhood experiences or whatever, childhood attachments, or is it the me, the present me? Yeah, or is it even something that isn't even me? Is that just something that I'm feeling as mine, you know, projected upon me by others?
I think sometimes I think it's mine, but you know, sometimes I'm not quite aware, and then I think, oh, it's mine, and perhaps it's not mine, really mine.
Yeah, so there's a confusion there that many of us
so-
have.
yeah.
And then we have a default, and the default, oh, it's got to be mine. And then we begin to identify. This is what we need to break through, guys, on this energy management level. Yeah, you know, we have to really internalize where we are standing right now. What's our truth right now? And am I even standing in truth? Okay, and then you can better fiddle this apart. Okay, yeah, this is stressful, you know, like many of you know this. I just moved here a couple of days ago, just a mile down the road, but a completely different energy in the neighborhood. And you know, as energy manager, I can't say I didn't know this before. I did know this before, but there were compromises that I was agreeing to, you know, that began to compromise my energy in a way that it felt like a constant fight against windmills. It was a constant, and most of it came from the outside. So I was aware how much of my internal energy was actually wasted on just, you know, fighting against the lawnmowers and the sirens and, you know, all this outer rah-rah. Okay. And change that with one decisive action. I mean, to just simply move into a neighborhood that is quieter. This may sound a bit secular as an example here, but you have to understand that this is the task for March, how it's going to display itself to you. You know, recognize what you are really willing to work with and deal with. And when you are, like for instance, in a living situation or in a relationship or in a work situation, where most of the rah-rah, most of the drama comes from the outside, and it's not really in your control to change it, you know, because you recognize, okay, all these people are in a reactive state, they're all fear-based, and the way they process it is by projecting all their fear.
Yeah.
And that is just really exhausting for me. So I might want to, you know, change my jobs and pick a job where people are more optimistic, where they feel, you know, that their work is maybe more meaningful, or, you know, something like that, where I don't have to energetically fight against these windmills all the time. A lot of people are chiming in here, you know, as an experience that they've been having as well. Now that said, you know, again, compromises are very practical, and we all need to make compromises. So that doesn't mean, you know, Annette, and you know this, right? But that doesn't mean, oh, you know, quit your job right away, you know, find it. That's not what that means at all. That would be the pendulum in the other extreme, okay? Because if you did that, well, then you have a whole new set of problems, namely that you have no income anymore, right? So that's not smart either. So this has to do with your contextualization and how you frame this for yourself, where you say, okay, my work is lots of drama all the time, it's probably never going to change, okay, due to the nature of my job and the type of people that get attracted to that kind of job. You know, how can I take all the experience and all that, in your case also seniority, you know, what you know, like work-wise, you know, pay grade-wise, and come to a compromise that allows me to focus on the things that bring growth instead of keep pulling me back into the past.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation. And you're already doing this, I know you do. But when it comes to March energies, it's really important to do this, or to cultivate this internalization. The internalization, not in the sense of sucking up or taking everything on. No, internalization as tool for discernment. Sit in it, feel into it. Is this even mine? You know, or is this coming from the outside? Can I even control this? Or is this not in my control? You know, like fully standing in the situation, how it makes you feel, what it makes you think, what it makes you want to do, and learn to discern if it's growth promoting, you know, if it's expansive for you, or if this is actually restrictive for you, and then base your choices on that awareness.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Annette. So this is a big tool, and with it also the antidote. Since the forecast for 21, I have talked about antidotes and inoculation. Obviously, that's also a bit of a word game. I code a lot of things into these words that I pick, and I predicted that every month we're gonna discover a new antidote, a new medicine for ourselves to get through this transformation in the most expansive way possible for us. And the first antidote that came forward for 21 was, you know, just really having this very conscious experience of our choice making, to remind ourselves to be more sort of conscious about every choice and what the energy is based on whenever we make a choice. Yeah, what is, you know, this is what conscious choice meant in January. And February was all about authenticity and recognizing that, you know, for us to even be able to make bigger changes in life, we need a good foundation. So to make authenticity our new foundation. The March antidote is to fully internalize, you know, who we are, where we're at, what we need, what we want. Okay, not necessarily having all answers, but at least becoming more clear about what's mine, what isn't, what can I control, what are the steps that I can make, what are my options, and then to move into this first step of integration. Now integration is a long-term process. You know, like it's one thing to find your voice and to speak up, speak truths, and be authentic, but it's another thing to change your life accordingly. And that is sort of what comes in with March energies now. So here you can see I've already, you know, analyzed this for us, what comes in with internalization. And Heather, you see how much of that you've actually covered with your sharing and this epiphany that you had this morning. It's an awakening to the end of a delusion. So in ego terms, we are awakening to actually how much we've deceived ourselves, which is why, you know, the whole judgment part needs to be kept in check. Okay, we couldn't before because we have a more clear, a more free way of thinking right now. And this is the beauty out of, you know, this February antidote. But we have to get into this more action-based a way of thinking now that is the consequence of our new insights. So if that is so, then what does this mean for me? Yeah, what is the conclusion? Yeah, so that's action-based. That is not necessarily an action per se. It just the conclusion, the next sort of level of that needs to be our conscious doing, our conscious and active doing. We need to come to that conclusion. And then recognize what the first step is, what the first thing is that we can do to integrate or to implement. And this will inevitably trigger, you know, aspects with self-responsibility. Because, you know, with our ability to out-vibrate untruths, okay, we will not just see how much we've deceived ourselves in the past, we'll also recognize that we really have a choice at any given moment. And when you feel that you have a choice, well, then you also feel that it's up to you how it develops. And the reason why I pointed your attention to responsibility versus reactivity, yeah, so learning how to respond, to cultivate that rather than to react, is because your ability to respond and responsibility, those are, you know, related terms. Yeah, self-responsibility is the ability to respond based, you know, from within your state of insight, from within your state of consciousness. And that requires self-awareness. And as a consequence of that, it will allow you to trust in yourself more. So authenticity, the foundation for, you know, embodiment, for integration, will gradually increase your trust in yourself and also your self-worth, and with it also the healing, the self-healing of some of these, you know, say childhood aspects or trauma aspects from the past. Once you realize that this is the main task for yourself, then you will also have to discipline yourself a little bit and recognize that there's no time for blind trust. This is not the time for blind trust or, you know, blind hope, false hope. fake positivity. This is the time to make a choice. Yeah, it's also not the time to externalize things. Yeah, the government, yeah, my boss, yeah, my partner. No. All that leads to the opposite of internalization. Yeah, it externalizes your power. And the more you externalize your power, the more you become victim of projection from the outside and other people's drama and collective drama. It's also not the time to go into fantastical thinking and try to seek, sort of mystical signs and everything. That's a big mistake, especially sort of in this spiritual circle, to mystify things when, in reality, you're expressing that you want to stay in your ego illusion. I bet that means that I need to move to Madagascar, or I bet that means this is my twin soul. Those kind of things, you need to discipline yourself there because they externalize. Fantastical thinking is a form of externalization. It's one of these two darknesses that I've mentioned to you frequently here lately. The getting lost in the outside world. And so is entitlement. We're not entitled to anything, especially in times of transformation. We have to claim our power. We have to put our claim out there. We have to put our stake out there. And that's actually wonderful because it allows us to internalize our power. But it can only be internalized if we actually do it. There's nothing that entitles you to, a more meaningful life or whatever. You give it the meaning. And if you don't do that, if you externalize, if you blame, or if you project this onto others, you will never be able to claim your power. Inaction, obviously, is a different expression of that. It's when people go into this freeze, they don't know what to do, there's no clarity there, and then they don't do anything because the ego says, well, not doing anything, at least I can't make mistakes. In March, that'd be a big mistake, okay? Because March energies are so transformative. It's chaotic transformation, but they're so transformative that they will support your claims, your choices, if you do them consciously, if it's a conscious response and not just a reaction. We here as a community went through a deep sort of working through people pleasing and these codependency components that many of us have formed over our lifetime. There's a beautiful recording of the Unhealed Healer workshop that we did. If you haven't had the time to watch this yet, watch this. There's no time for people pleasing here because it externalizes your powers. Okay. And obviously, the overall evolutionary momentum here is to move into more unity, into more inner, into a state of higher degrees of inner unification. So anything that is extreme, anything that is imbalanced, anything that is segregating or separating or fanatic, okay, is going to be painful, as is perfectionism. March is not the time for perfectionism, and is not the time for continuing things the way you have been doing things, especially if one of your motivations in the past was to not make mistakes. If your fear of making mistakes was one of the things that held you back. Yes, Denise, creating and co-creating from a space of sovereignty, moment to moment. That is exactly true. This is a continual process and it needs to be done consequentially. That is what I mean with cultivating. So in that way, March is a really a powerful month because it can really shift things for us in a big way. So looking at the energy forecast here and the analysis of March energies, which has a different title, it's called Adjusting to a New Paradigm. Yes, this new paradigm being a paradigm of more truth and more integrity. That is just the energetic nature of this, of March energies. Then let's look at the different components here, how this will come forward to us physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, spiritual, and energetically. Any more sharings maybe, or things that you would like to contribute before we go into the analysis of how to break all this down? All right, so yeah, welcome back to the energy forecast and analysis for March 21. We come together here to illuminate these energies of the time and illuminate them or look at them through the lens of these different levels of perception that we all have physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, spiritually, and energetically, to better contextualize, to better understand what it actually is that we are experiencing. I would like to start out with the overall collective situation that we're in right now here at the end of February and that we're moving into in March. As I have already forecasted in the 2021 plus forecast that encompasses 21, 22, and 23 really as a sort of a cluster of transformational years. Here in March, we're actually more or less arriving in this new future. Okay, it's very action oriented. It's very much more practical in that way, much more pragmatic. Integration needs to happen after 1 year of COVID affecting us on all these levels, physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, and politically. We are now sort of realizing our losses. We are realizing the delusions of the past, and it's basically sort of the go place. Okay, we have to decide now where we're going to go next. We don't need to have all the answers. There's a lot of unknowns still. For example, will the vaccines work? How will the economic impact ultimately play out? And what does this do to us as a, as a species? Yeah, what are the consequences, the long-term consequences of all of this? Those are still unknowns. So the answers aren't there yet, but we can position ourselves in this now. February was all about gaining more clarity and allowing all this, what was previously sort of fogged up or diluted, to become or to come to our awareness. March in that way, in this collective way, it will follow up on this more action-oriented energy that March has through new revelations, through new uncoverings, mostly related to media, related to political conspiracies, and things that a lot of people, kind of felt all along but couldn't put a finger on it. If you're asking me personally, I think that we will gain a very impactful new insights about creation itself, life itself, perhaps related to some of these new truths that are being revealed around maybe alien encounters or life on other planets. This could be related to the Mars research and so forth. I don't want to speculate on this. I just want to give you a heads up here that March has this energy to bring in a much bigger sort of context, more of a cosmic or planetary context that changes not just the way we see things or not just the way how they are being displayed in the media or whatever the current propaganda is, but that show a whole new paradigm of thinking, a whole new paradigm of being and seeing ourselves. And this is something that I have been predicting for the last decade, because this is nothing new, really. This has been coming in, and energetically, those of us who call themselves energetically sensitive have been feeling this all along. So what March energies now do in people is that they really uncover the emotional schism underneath all of this. So we have to basically agree or accept the fact that the old isn't coming back, and we still have to let go of all that sort of nostalgia and sentimentalism about the past, and let that go. It doesn't serve us anymore, the way we've approached things in the past, so that we are more fit to deal with the future. And this will not come easy to our nations, to our divided state of collective. Okay, so we'll see a lot of war continued in countries, some of what we were seeing in Myanmar right now, and in Asia, as a sort of a response to suppression and propaganda over there, which is a slightly different nature than the one that we experience here in the sort of Anglo-American Western world. All right, so we are not experiencing, or will not experience, resolutions here in March, but we'll see a more down to earth, common sense revelation of truth that will show us what's really important to deal with, and more so in the sense of we cannot continue the way we have been doing it. Just because that's the way we have been doing it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to move forward. So collectively, we're seeing these chaotic transformation energies in more unrest. Okay, there's also a planetary aspect to that that will continue to affect us in March, here in the winter months in the Northern Hemisphere. We've already got a little taste of what sort of unusual weather patterns can do to our economies, to the mental, social, and spiritual state of our nations. This will continue. So there is chaotic transformation happening, and it always feels extremely unsettling for people and triggers fear and triggers anger. All right, so we have to understand that the erraticness is not because people are dumb. I try to refrain from judgment here, but it's because they're most animalistic part of themselves, part of their brain, this reactive part of the brain, the amygdala, is being triggered big time, and that makes people appear irrational. So irrationality will continue to be a theme here amongst us, and that means that in this month we'll see change in that most vulnerable place here, as sort of a ruling paradigm for us, namely financials. So March is a big month for the stock market, for the banking system, and I'll give you some important dates to look out for here in a few minutes. Something that has already announced itself in February as predicted. So collectively, we're not looking for solutions yet. Okay, we're still in the process of gaining more clarity and letting go of the old. And what this month feels like, how it is going to feel for us collectively, is sort of like a healing crisis or a shock therapy, a word that came up during the True Self session that we had just a few days ago. Yeah, so chaotic transformation as sort of healing catharsis, as sort of, it has to get a little worse before it can get better. For us as a whole entire collective to realize that we can no longer continue the way we have been approaching things in the past. So it has to become more realistic. And for us energetically sensitives, it also has to become more authentic, more integrous, more congruent, because straddling two worlds and experiencing this duality between what we see as spiritual reality and 3D reality consumes a lot of our energy. If we cannot bring this together, if we cannot unify this, it promotes, schisms such as, inner child stuff, codependency, shadow stuff, and so forth. So this is the self-responsibility part. We have to step up and step into this by consciously internalizing where we're at and where we want to be. Chakra-wise, this will affect, our first and seventh chakra. That's really the identity that we have here on this planet. Okay, this is not very spiritual. This is more so the reality of existence. Okay, we'll get a lot of sort of spiritual impulses, very, very beautiful impulses in March, but at the same time, we'll also be forced to be very down to earth and to root all this in our 3D reality. That's what I previously called authenticity. We will experience issues around our emotional processing, around our reactivity, because that's based on the past, and everything that's unresolved from the past for us personally, will kind of haunt us until we actually make that step and go into a higher expression, we go into the self-actualization part. So that affects pretty much all our chakras, but primarily our second and fourth. And the second is, emotional processing, is where we hold our wants, our desires, also our coping, how we have been coping in the past, and then our heart awareness, our fourth chakra, our heart chakra, that informs us about how things can be more authentic, and that will then collide with our ego in our third chakra. That will get a lot of sort of boost of energy in March, but it has to be disciplined. It has to be cultivated. So in that way, we're looking at a month here of compounded problems, really, and it will literally play out in all these areas for us personally as well as collectively: health, finances, weather, and political as well. So not a month for solutions, but a month to become more clear about where we're standing and where we want to go. Physically, it'll affect us in a way that I can best describe as the need for a spring cleaning, to really clear out the old in literal ways. I just moved into a new house 2 days ago, and I can not tell you how relieving that is, even though it's a lot of work and uprooting and all that, to go through all your stuff and clear out things and throw things away and clean everything on the outside is an extremely positive process. That has to happen sort of outside in and inside out. So it's a really cool month to bring things in order, whether it's cleaning up your finances, cleaning up your kitchen or your closets, doing a good energy clearing. It's like an inventory taking, all right, that allows us to better position ourselves. But physically, these new beginning energies can make us very restless, and can also lead to coping, like say binge eating, or sort of just trying to get by, and that we need to cultivate that. March is a really, really good month for, I don't want to say dieting, but for maybe changing the way we look at our diet, working on our nutrition, changing this into a higher vibratory nutrition, so that that our body has a better condition. Because healing, even physical healing, as you know, is always a two-way street. One is obviously to remove that which makes you sick, but the second healing strategy that is almost more important then removing that which makes you sick, is to strengthen your own system, to provide a better environment, okay, for healing. And so I strongly recommend that you use this time in March to really work with some big decisions about foods and stuff. So this new beginning energy, allow that to integrate in the way you eat, you move, you approach things. Emotionally, I've already mentioned it can be a bit schismatic, so we have to work with our emotional processing and internalize what we're actually feeling. A lot of us energetically sensitives and empaths have a hard time with that, with differentiating if what we're feeling is even ours, or if it is something that we have been absorbing from others, if it is something that we are exposed to on a regular basis, then it becomes really hard for us to know if this is even, something that we need to identify with. I actually recommend in March not to identify with anything and to question, your physical sensations, your emotions, and your thoughts about what you're experiencing at any time. So to really systematically work your way to the deeper part in you that can inform you more truthfully and authentically about what it is that you need, that you feel, and what needs to be expressed. It's the only way to learn how to trust in yourself more, and then ultimately also to begin to feel more confident and higher self, to develop a higher self-worth. That's part of the mental translation here for March. Self-worth issues have to do with our true intention, with our true motive behind our choices. And if we don't internalize this, if we are not sure what our true reason is, why we're doing things, maybe based on these emotional schisms of the past or nostalgia or whatever, then our self-sabotage stuff flies under our radar. We can't even detect how we are working against ourselves, and it requires us to break through some of these deep-seated beliefs that we have. So my coaching tip for you is to actually inquire about your true reason, internalize your true reason. What is my true intention behind this here? That will then also help with the emotional processing, because then you can much better discern what you're actually feeling and where this is going. Socially, in your relationships, this will have a huge impact. It's a very, very big relationship month, and it can lead to a renewal of an old relationship because you are willing to accept the delusions of the past, and you can come to this place and say, okay, this is our inventory, this is where we're at, this is what I want. How do you feel about this? So just as how we can provide a better environment or a better condition for our body to heal, we can also do this for our finances or for our relationship by doing this sort of balance sheet, this inventory, and say, okay, this is where we're at. And you know what, come to think of it, that's actually not what I want for my future, or this is not really my true intention. My true intention is, all right. And it can really help us to also express our true feelings, because sometimes in relationships we develop apart a little bit because we've become too reactive over time. And to say no more, I don't want this to continue, because if we continue the way we have been doing things in the recent past, then it already has a sort of an expiration date on it. It already has a sort of a self-destruct energy to it. So if I want to change that, I have to be active. That's the action orient. I have to say, okay, look, let's sit together. Let's really look at what we've got here and express your true feelings and your true intentions. And sometimes it can be a conversation as simple as, you know what, I know this hasn't really been going well here in these past years or months, but what I truly want is a life with you. I truly love you and I really want this. So let's try to work this out together. So for relationships, it's the together aspect. the the unifying on this. Let's do this together. Yeah. And there'll be a big impact here on this spiritual level in regards to love, because this sort of spiritual impulse that I mentioned earlier, that beautiful spiritual impulse that is also coming in here in the midst of this chaotic transformation, and will also kind of trigger a new definition of love for us, and it will bring something in when it comes to fully internalizing what our intention is with our relationship. That there's something like I don't want to mystify this, but something like a divine love aspect, yeah, that there is something very sacred about our love for another, and that there is a much higher purpose, without going into fantasy about this. All right, so we'll have to work through this year as March progresses, the confusions of that, the confusions of spiritual love. This will be one of the big sort of self-healing themes here for us in the sacred self-healing community. I've already mentioned self-worth has a lot to do with our relationships in that way, that it allows us to better step into our power. But like I've said earlier, without authenticity and the resolve to do this and to discipline and cultivate what we truly want and what our true intentions are, it cannot translate into self-worth. So you have to understand how all this is related with another. Those are the tasks here for March, and the one of the beautiful aspects of March is that it also gives us a lot of freedom. It gives us a lot of artistic freedom to express things. So don't think that you necessarily have to define everything in words. Okay, there's a lot of ways how to express things, especially around love and relationships, and give yourself the freedom to express things in multiple ways. Many of you feel much stronger in, say, like a physical expression, or like expressing something through a painting or through music, or it's easier to give the right resonance to our feelings in that way. So give yourself that freedom to do this. There's a beautiful sort of artistic expression about March as well. All right. So energetically, it's all about keep moving, keep really being clear about where you're at, what you need, what you want, the discipline and needed to integrate, to be pragmatic about it, and watch extremes. Okay, always visualize it as a pendulum. The most stable place is in the middle, is not in the extremes. But our psychology and this sort of less sophisticated part of our system, of our nervous system, always operates in form of extremes, these dualisms. So find a way, make that your internalization task, to look for the middle, for the center here. And sometimes it's a very literal thing, namely by grounding yourself in the physical, or by moving more into your heart and learning how to express things more authentically from your heart. Important dates for March, right here in the first week of March, around March 5th, guys. That's something that we will, experience perhaps as a little restless at first, because the days from here to there, so from this full moon to this time next week, the end of next week, will be accompanied by a lot of sort of schisms, these dualisms that I just talked about, and it will make you restless. And around next weekend, you'll feel that there is a rapid, sort of, this is a part of these shock therapy energies, a rapid shift, a rapid change, something that you couldn't even have expected or anticipated just a couple of days ago. Okay, so it's things are going to speed up, yeah, by the end of next week. Significant and probably also way showing here for the development in March is a bit of a critical time around the 13th and 14th of March. It comes with this activity. Okay, so for those people who can't process this restlessness and this schismatic and chaotic transformation energy, it can lead to an outer sort of explosion, if you will, or if the darkness is translated into fanaticism, into this sort of completely sort of going into la la land with more conspiracy theories and so forth, escapism. We'll see. I've predicted this for many years, and it'll take on more and more form here as the year progresses. More and more religious fanaticism. Be prepared for that. Understand that a big part of New Age, and that coming from me as an energy healer, is should show you something, is a variation of religious fanaticism. Okay, so most of what is propagated through some of these not very sophisticated spiritual laws, okay, are sending people into the wrong direction, into the wrong escapes. Okay, there's a big part of that has to do with this spiritual love that I mentioned here a few minutes ago, and devotion. So what am I devoting myself to? This has to do with my true intentions. And we'll see some really weird outcroppings of that, and it will impact some of the financial markets. So right around the equinox, which is the 20th, 21st of March, we're going to see these reset energies that a lot of people are talking about manifesting. So there is a very a sort of unsettling time here for our economy ahead, and it will come with the sort of media wars, this war of perception, this war of this mind control war that I have been sort of characterizing 2021 with, will come forward. You'll see that no matter what, or depending on what source of news you look at, you'll get completely different contextualization of what is going on, and it will hit us with surprise. So March has that shock therapy energy, and that will most likely happen around this equinox time. Here at transCODES, as you know, I'm taking those energies and I produce sort of the antidotes, the medicine for that in these remote energy sessions, these transmissions that I schedule around those times. And if you look at the transCODES calendar, you can actually see these important dates integrated in form of energy work modalities that I've identified to be most conducive to deal with this, for dealing with all of this. So here, right around the 4th, 5th March, we have to clear some of this karmic family attachments that we have, because they are clouding our true intentions and our motivations for doing things. They're steering it, binding it to our ego. All right, and it's very important here to investigate the mechanics of mind control and this war of perception, which you see here integrated as a workshop for you guys on March 6th. Then we have to recenter again to find our equilibrium with the heart clearing, with removing some of these attachments that are still lingering, and then move forward during this time that I named as critical here, 13th, 14th, with how to consciously make choices that increase our manifestation efficiency and our abundance. On the 13th, the Healing Circle Workshop, Conscious Love and Money Manifestation. And then around the difficult time in the equinox, connect with your true self, our monthly free energy work session, and followed by the etheric protection marathon day, where we practice, it's energy training, how to protect and inoculate ourselves on an etheric, on an auric level. There's another important date, and that's at the very last days of March, the 29th and 30th, coming in with a very interesting sort of dragon energy. It's a renewal energy that forces us into clarity. So most people experience that as uncomfortable, but those of us like yourselves who are consciously working on authenticity, on standing in truth, speaking truth, and bringing ourselves into a higher level of expression, you will find this relieving. But there's a big sort of potential for misunderstandings around this time. So I wouldn't take everything as hot as it gets cooked here around this time. Things have to calm down. They're a little too hot still by the end of March. April will bring in more information so that we can see our strategy through into the more distant future. Okay, so you see, it's a mixed bag of things, but everything steers to its transformation. Chaotic, creative, and surprising. So my big tip for you is empower yourself to be able to deal with surprises. Don't get too rigid. It's not the time for perfectionism. It's not the time for self-pity. It's not the time for people-pleasing. And obviously, as you can tell by my choice of marathon for March, it's not the time for codependency. Okay, so this is the biggest, the core healing modality here for March, right at the end of the month, working through these different layers of projection and absorption, how we have been externalizing our needs, and you know, some of these coping and covert control mechanisms, emotional manipulation, that we have been allowing to supersede or dominate our true intentions in the past. That needs to be cleared up. All right, so personally, I am looking forward to all of this. And there are many aspects to, you know, us being willing to be pragmatic, but I can promise you that March overall is an extremely powerful manifestation month. And if you are willing to stay in the present, to go into your center, to work on standing in truth, then this confrontation with untruth and all the propaganda and the mind control stuff and all that won't bother you, because you'll be able to see through this. But remember, it's not the other extreme that you want to go into. You want to stay in neutrality, because the less you judge yourself, the less you judge others, the less energy gets consumed, and the more effective and the more successful your manifestations. You just have to really know what it is that you're manifesting. So in that way, I'm very excited about March. I'm wishing you guys all happy self-discovery, happy manifestation, and I will do my part here on my end by offering education, by offering systematic energy training, and of course also personal energy coaching and so forth to assist you in navigating through March energies. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Sacred Self-Healing Community, for this wonderful discussion. Bye-bye.